They shall come from the east, they shall come from the west, and sit down in the kingdom of God. Out of great tribulation to triumph and rest, they'll sit down in the kingdom of God. From every tribe and every race, all men as brothers shall embrace. They shall come from the east, they shall come from the west, and sit down in the kingdom of God. Thank you, Michael. That was beautiful. I'd like to thank you all for coming. You're here either because you respected my mother or because you showed respect for my family. And if it was out of respect for a member of the family, it too is because of her. For she made us who each one of us is and gave us the standards by which we live. So really, it is out of respect for her either way. And that alone is a great eulogy in itself. She really and truly made a difference to those around her and those with whom she interacted. At a time like this, one is tempted to tell only good things, the pleasantries, and the feel-good moments. But if I'm to be honest, I must tell you what my mum was really like. She had many qualities that were great. She listened well. She was very thoughtful in her approach to things. For example, she did not tell us outright not to swear, but rather taught us that there are wonderful words in the English language with which we could express our feelings clearly, eloquently, and seemingly politely, without the use of vile profanities. And that by using a better way of expressing ourselves, we would feel good, and the other person would actually pay attention and would listen. And that we would not appear to be crude. And it worked. I found that no one pays attention to someone who is constantly spewing out vile profanities. But if you are angry and yet you speak clearly, carefully, and with politeness, people do actually speak. However, this does not mean that sometimes she did not open the car window when she was driving and shout at other drivers like, "Do you know what an indicator is? Or who taught you how to drive?" On those occasions, my brothers and I would sink in the back seat and hide and hope that nobody saw who we were or recognized Mum. She was human. She also liked to drive with speed. And once, that we remember, while driving some ladies to an army function, she phoned Dad in St. John's from Grand Falls to ask if he knew that front wheels of the car wobbled when she went over 90. I believe Dad told her not to drive over 90. But of course, that was when it was miles per hour and the road was gravel. 90. She was hardworking, methodical, and very thorough in everything that she did. She had very high standards for herself and expected everyone else to have the same high standards for themselves. She led and taught by example. She was a trained school teacher, but was taught in the days that did not allow the regional accents to be used by school teachers. So she was taught how to speak the Queen's English, something that I never questioned or thought was strange until several years ago. On that occasion, Mum and Dad were still in India, but had come back to the UK for an international leaders conference. So I went from Canada to have a short holiday with them. And I'd never been to Mum's part of the country, to northern England. And so I hired a car. And I drove my parents up to Lancashire, where she was from, to her hometown of Oldham. And England has all sorts of little marketplaces in the centre of the towns. And in one of these, I went in to a shop to find a model for my brother. I went in and I started to talk to the shopkeeper. And suddenly I had a problem. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. His Lancashire accent was so strong, his phraseology was so different, that I was absolutely stuck. So I turned around and I said, "Mum, can you come in and help me?" She came in to talk to this fellow, and that was great. But within 5 minutes, I could no longer understand her either. I couldn't understand a word she said. And she got back into the car, and then we drove a little bit further down into Wales, which is where my dad is from. And he slipped into that accent. Suddenly, on the ride back to London, I had two parents in the back seat. Neither one could I understand a word they were saying. I had never thought about it. I had always thought that Mum had spoken with a clear, crisp accent that I was so used to. And it was something that I was reminded of only in the last couple of weeks as she emphasized that correctly enunciated English, and it came out in the hospital room. She had a very hard time with incorrect English as a teacher. Things like double negatives, incorrect grammar, poor spelling or editing of documents. And to this day, I cannot, even if I try, say a sentence with a double negative. It just doesn't work. And many are the occasions that I remember her being given a form to fill out, and along with putting in the information on the form that was required, she corrected the grammar and the spelling in the form itself, crossing out words, changing sentences and punctuation before handing back the corrected form completely filled out. Dad did many articles for various army publications over the years, but I know that every single one of them first went through the editorial department of Mum. She corrected, and then Dad would rewrite. Mum would then re-scrutinize, and then it would be sent off to the correct place for publication. Mum and Dad were a team that worked together in everything. Mum was also born left-handed, but again was not permitted to teach like that, so learnt to use her right hand, which became her dominant hand. But her beautiful, clear handwriting was just as good from either hand. And although she passed many traits on to my brothers and I, good, clear handwriting wasn't one of them. One thing she did pass on was a sense of humor. Not the humor of joke-telling, but that sense of seeing the funny side in things. It almost got into trouble several times. And I remember sitting in a church services in the congregation, and she would sit up on the platform, and something would happen in the most inopportune moments that struck both her and I as being funny. And we did our absolute best not to make eye contact, because you knew full well we'd both burst out laughing. She was like that. She had that wonderful sense of seeing something funny in these strange occasions. But she did it not just in the church, she did it elsewhere. And I remember when my parents came home from India on one occasion and stayed in my apartment in Toronto. I'd done their laundry in the machines in the basement of the apartment building, and brought it all back upstairs, folded, nice and neat. And Mum commented when I walked through the front door of the apartment, and she says, "Oh, very good, and you've even folded it for me." And I said, "Yes, but I don't know how to fold these," and held up a bra. Dad cringed, and Mum burst out laughing and said, "Oh, you're bad." She told me that quite often. "Oh, you're bad," but always with a loving smile on her face. Even at Health Sciences Centre only a week ago, she did this to me. With a playful swat of the air with her hand and a smile on her face and the words, "You're bad." Just a week ago. But she didn't need to speak. Her facial expressions would tell you many things without saying a single word. She could give a look that said, "Wow, that's lovely," or "That's enough," or another, "Don't you dare," or the dreaded face that said, "No," in such a manner that you definitely wouldn't, never ever challenge that look. She was always approachable and open, and I've talked to Stephen about this, and we both agree that we could talk to her about anything, any subject from a wide range of topics, and she would answer clearly, thoughtfully, honestly. She would give us her opinion and then say that although this is what she thought, it may not be the right choice for us, that we would have to make up our own minds. She loved to discuss politics, world events, religion. She loved animals and gardening and photography. She had the ability to make a meal out of almost nothing and make it tasty and interesting. She could knit, sew, embroider, cross-stitch. She loved crossword puzzles, the hard type of crossword puzzles, the ones that I don't even understand the clues of, yet alone work out the answers. And these she filled out with a pen, not with a pencil, because she never had to erase it or correct it. She just worked her way methodically through the crossword. She loved to read. She was told off by a superior officer when they first got to India that as lieutenants they were not entitled to a certain number of bookcases. And her response was, "Aren't lieutenants supposed to read?" She kept the bookcase. But yes, she loved novels. She loved mysteries, murder stories, and this love continued right through to retirement. Why, 10 years ago, she was even a board member of the library in Holyrood, helping to select books for that library. She also had a love of good music. She loved the dignity of the Anglican church hymns, the exuberance of a good army sing with a band, and the thoughtful majesty and wonder of Handel's Messiah. She also loved secular music from artists like Val Doonican and Simon and Garfunkel and the Beatles, although I think the last two she really liked because my brother Stephen liked them, but she seemed to like them as well. She had very strong dislikes as well. The repetitive, just a moment, let me look around, I'm safe. The repetitive, non-doctrinal, emotional music of worship bands that she considered, to use her words, to be nothing more than an irritating noise. Yes, she was outspoken. You always knew where you stood with her. She was exactly what you saw. There was no pretense, no makeup, no facade. She was honest to herself first and was happy with who she was. She was honest to those around, sometimes without as much tact that one might hope for. Only in the last few weeks, when she had arrived in Glenbrook, another retired walked into her room with a walker and said, "You look good." And Mum's response was instantaneous. "I look better than you." Definitely one of those occasions that a little tact might have been a good thing. She was exactly as you saw her. No airs and graces, no lofty illusions of grandeur, just a Salvation Army officer, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a school teacher, and a host of other things too. And of course, to me, she was my mum. She seemed to be able to do anything she put her hand to because she believed in herself. She believed that men and women were equal in God's sight and that you should use all the gifts that God has given you, that you should live up to your full potential. She lived through World War II in England, the heat, the droughts and floods and epidemics of India, the cold of Labrador, in bustling cities, in rural communities, in the thin, crisp air of the mighty Himalayas and the steamy heat of South India. She lived an incredible life with many fascinating experiences, meeting wonderful people all along the way, seeing sights that we can only dream of and many we cannot even imagine. She was trained as an ambassador in the International Training College of the Salvation Army in London, England, but she lived as an ambassador of Christ. She held her belief very firmly in God through some difficult days, even when having to make some awful decisions, but holding on to her faith all the way through, trusting in God for the strength and guidance to carry her through. She has done a terrific job, and today we salute her. But she is now in a better place. And I overheard my brother Stephen respond to someone who said that to him yesterday at the funeral home. And his response was, "I don't know if she is in a better place, as Newfoundland is a pretty good place too." So, Mum, you are truly in the best of both worlds. Your body remains here in Newfoundland, while your soul is in heaven, and you can't beat that. Thank you for all that you've done, for all that you have influenced, all you have taught, and for leaving this world a far better place and giving us confidence, the same unshakable confidence you had in God and his ability to carry us through thick and thin in this life. We will meet again, and until then, we will remember you and all that you have meant to us. Thank you, Mum.